Brooke Furio. I've spent the last 3 years as a USEPA employee. I work out of Chicago, Illinois, for the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And I was put on a detail to the city of Cleveland working for the mayor's development cluster. The development cluster is made up of most of the development departments in the city of Cleveland: planning, law, community development, economic development, building and housing. My job was to come up with a program, design it, and then manage it, hopefully pilot it, that dealt with recycling land. And the term we used was land bank program. The city's had a land bank program since the late 70s that focused on residential residential pieces of property. What we were trying to do is deal with all the vacancies and underutilized property that was former industrial and commercial, which makes up a huge swath of property in the city of Cleveland, and it left quite a legacy from the Industrial Revolution. What I feel land is so important, especially in distressed communities like the city of Cleveland, because land is what you have value. Land, people forget, but local governments operate basically from the revenues produced by land. Everything we do, from schools to the arts, to basically cleaning your streets and maintaining the streets and water systems, every service you get from a local government is tied from the revenues that come from land. So it's key that your land is healthy. If you were a business, you would make sure you're selling whatever it is you sell, and if you have to market it or bring in innovations to those widgets, you need to maintain them. Local governments must maintain their cash cow, essentially, which is land. That's their revenue source. Some cities, because of their historical legacy, have tremendous obstacles to doing that, and I think Cleveland and much of what people refer to as Rust Belt do. In the past, they've called them brownfields, but my experience in Cleveland has brought me to this much bigger problem than just brownfields. The properties are impaired with a variety of challenges. Some of them are legal, some of them are zoning, some of them are obsolete buildings that need to be demolished. Some of them are just the properties are too small. Basically, the assets, the attributes of the property, if you add them all up, they cause major impairments. And it's extremely difficult for the local governments to set a market for the land and allow or even have any interest from private developers come in and be able to function and redevelop that property. In other words, the market is having a very tough time dealing with land in places like the city of Cleveland. And what I guess if I wanted to tell anybody that pays taxes in the city of Cleveland or lives in Cleveland, or anybody that drives through Cleveland or any other cities like it, what's wrong with the city? Why is there so many vacancies? I think it's simple math. Property in Cleveland that's zoned industrial and commercial averages, at least in 2007, averaged roughly between $50,000 and $80,000 an acre. That's not to say there aren't some segments of the market that it goes up as high as $150,000 or even $300,000 an acre. But on a whole, most of the properties are in that $50,000 to $80,000 an acre. What we learned at the city of Cleveland is that when the city, acting as basically a landowner, takes title to one of those properties and begins to do the work to put it into a position where the market can come back and play. In other words, where a businessman or a developer would come in and be willing to invest in that property and make it into something new. It's costing the city in terms of acquisitions costs or assembly costs. In other words, getting the property into something that's of scale, that's big enough, 10 acres, 20 acres, to getting rid of the obsolete buildings that don't meet the needs of manufacturing today, to deal with the environmental problems that may or may not exist on the property. It's around $300,000 an acre. And I think most people understand that you cannot be expected to spend $300,000 an acre on a piece of property in the hopes of selling it for 50 or 80. It's a lose-lose situation. And what you have is a market failure. And I think many of the cities, whether they have complete market failure or just segments of their city are failing when it comes to real estate, that market failure has been occurring in Cleveland for 20 years and has slowly gotten worse to the point where it's now impacting the residential properties, because you are not seeing new jobs or businesses come into Cleveland, and therefore people don't need to live in Cleveland. And so you're seeing a lot of residential property go vacant as well. So what is it that should a government be involved? It's very expensive, it's very risky work to have a government involved in land, but I think it's one of those things that sets the table for economic development and revitalization of any community. And it doesn't even have to be revitalization. Any city has to maintain their properties so that the market, the changing economy, whatever you predict it may come in the future, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years, there will always be a need for land. There will always be a need for commerce, a place for commerce to take place. We're talking about places to operate businesses. And if your land is in a condition that that cannot take place in a reasonable economic investment, then you're going to die. And I think that's what's happening much of the Midwest. So that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I would really like to see policies. I don't think it has to be the local government intervention, all just in cash and grants to demo and clean up properties. I think there are plenty of policies that wouldn't cost government money, some institutions that could be created, and again, some subsidy that would help local governments recycle their land to the point that the market, because in the end what you want is a market to take place, that the properties come back into the market, and then from that point on, the normal day-to-day routines of a capital market come into play, and developers and businesses come and purchase the property and build new job-producing businesses and enterprises on them. That's what we're about, and I think I'll leave it at that. That I think needs to be addressed for many of the